2025 has been the year where I played quite a bit of games. That's mainly because I started playing games on stream this year, and I'll tell you guys, it really opened up a whole new world for me. I ended up trying so many games that I never thought I'd actually enjoy. The plan this year was to finish some of my backlog. Well, as you're about to see, that plan went kinda sideways. Hello everyone, my name is Zenkyi and this video is gonna be all about the games I've played in 2025. Now some of these games I have played before, but the majority of them were completely new to me. To keep this list from becoming unnecessarily long, I've decided to only include games that I've played for at least 2 hours, because I think that's a fair amount to give an opinion on the game. I won't be going into detail about the story because this is gonna be a long list and I want to go over each game pretty quickly. Just a heads up, there's gonna be spoilers in the video of the games I talk about. This list is in no particular order and I am by no means a professional game reviewer, so these are just my personal thoughts and opinions. I also stream most of the games I play over on Twitch and YouTube, so if you have the time, feel free to drop by and say hi. And let me know down in the comments below which games you have enjoyed the most this year. First up in the list is 2019's Remedy's Control. In this game you play as Jesse Faden, who becomes the new director of the Federal Bureau of Control. The story is very weird in this game and a bit confusing at times, but it is quite interesting and it has this mysterious feeling to it that makes you want to explore more and find out what is happening. The combat in this game is so much fun. Throughout the game you unlock new weapons and abilities like telekinetic powers to move objects and levitation to reach new areas. What I really like about this is that the powers aren't just used in combat, but they're also used in puzzles and platforming, which makes the gameplay feel more connected and engaging. The DLC add more action, boss fights and extra story content to it, which is always a good thing. It even has a connection to the Alan Wake series. Overall, I would say Control is a great experience. The story can be a little bit hard to follow at times, but the combat, abilities and atmosphere make it a solid game that I definitely recommend. Speaking of Alan Wake, yeah, I'm gonna be honest guys, Control made me curious about the Alan Wake games, so I decided to play the first one. This game came out in 2010 and I have to say, this game still looks and feels surprisingly good. Alan Wake has a strong focus on storytelling. The whole game is broken into episodes and it presents the story sort of like a TV show, narrated by Alan himself since he is a novelist. As you play, you find manuscript pages that describe events happening in the story, sometimes even before they occur. The game has this eerie, dark atmosphere, often leaving you questioning what just happened after certain moments in the game. The combat in Alan Wake revolves around using your flashlight in order to break enemies their shield and finish them off using guns you find throughout the game. I've seen a lot of people online describe Alan Wake's gameplay as mediocre, janky, or a bit repetitive, but I actually liked it. To me, it felt responsive and I think it's really cool that the weapons don't have a traditional crosshair. Instead, you aim using your flashlight alongside your weapon, which effectively acts as your crosshair. I really enjoyed the first game and eventually I want to play the second one as well. Monster Hunter Wilds released this year and in my opinion, yeah, it's honestly a great game. For those of you who are on PC, don't let the mixed Steam reviews fool you. Most of them are about performance issues. And while I had quite a bit of issues at launch, the game is in a much better state now, even though it's still not the most optimized game out there. If you enjoy slaying big monsters with all kinds of weapons, this game is definitely for you. Personally, I have played Monster Hunter World and a bit of Rise, and Wilds feels very similar to Monster Hunter Worlds, which is actually a good thing since Worlds is a pretty beginner friendly game to get into the series. There's a lot of monster and weapon variety and the maps are all interconnected. What I really liked about Monster Hunter Wilds is the dynamic weather system, where each phase affects the environment, resources and monster spawns. Another thing I like was the seamless hunting. You can enter a map, start fighting a large monster and the quest begins automatically. After you defeat it, the quest completes without sending you back to base, saving you much time and also being able to hunt multiple large monsters in one go. Now I have to say I did find the game pretty easy compared to the others, and the end game, at least at launch, felt lackluster, with the Arcean weapons being the best but looking pretty ugly. And at the time there wasn't a transmog feature yet. But the game is getting regular updates and new monsters, so there's plenty of content coming. Overall, it's a good game with some flaws, but definitely worth playing. Oh boy, out of pure curiosity, I went back to the first game and see how it all started. Monster Hunter Freedom released in 2006 and is basically the PSP version of the original Monster Hunter, which came out in 2004 on the PS2. And I'll just say this, if you don't care about the series history and just want smooth, fun gameplay, I don't recommend playing this. It is so brutal. Now I will say the graphics have a certain charm to it, but the mechanics, hitboxes and quests are some of the worst in the series. While the franchise has seen many changes throughout the years, the core gameplay always stayed the same. You go on and take on quests, explore the map, slay monsters or gather items, with the only difference being that maps weren't interconnected yet and were split into separate areas. This was actually changed in World. And also, since the PSP didn't have a right analog stick, controlling the camera is painfully awkward in this game because you have to basically use the face buttons. Animations like healing were also extremely slow, so you really needed to time everything in order to not get hit. Then there's the infamous egg delivery quest. Guys, arguably the worst quests ever made in the Monster Hunter games. These quests require you to carry an egg found in a nest somewhere on the map back to camp without breaking it. Seems easy, right? Absolutely not. While you're holding the egg, your stamina drains faster, you can't dodge, and if you get hit or fall from a ledge even once, the egg breaks instantly. Guys, this was so frustrating, I basically had to cheat with save states to get through it. If for some ever reason you want to try it and want to lose your sanity, play on an emulator with fast forward on or the PS Vita so you can map the right stick camera controls to an actual second analog stick. But even with all the frustration, I've got to give Capcom credit. There was nothing like Monster Hunter back then. And it's cool to see how much the series has evolved from this almost 20-year-old game. Ori and the Blind Forest is a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing game. I'm still on my first playthrough, but so far it's been quite challenging. The game is heavily focused on platforming in some of the most creative ways I've seen. Now, I haven't played many platformers in my life, so it could be that some of these platform mechanics have already been done in games. But for example, there was this one section where I had to hold an orb, which then allowed Ori to shift the gravity. You could go up a wall and walk vertically, but your jump is also changed to a vertical jump. It just made for some pretty cool platforming that I've never seen before. What really surprised me about Ori and the Blind Forest was the difficulty. The game may look innocent and cozy, but damn, it gets pretty tough later on. The enemies can hit very hard, the platforming can get challenging later on, and if you don't pay attention, you can die very quickly in this game. Where Ori and the Blind Forest for me shines the most is in its platforming. For example, there was this water escape sequence where the water steadily rises from the bottom of the screen, forcing you to climb all the way up to escape. It just looks so beautiful, and on top of that, the music in this game. I'm not usually someone who pays close attention to game soundtracks, but I can definitely recognize how calming and amazing the soundtrack is. The story is pretty simple but still interesting. It's mostly told through visuals, short cutscenes, and the environment instead of a lot of dialogue, which is in my opinion a nice touch since it really helps keeping the focus on the gameplay while still making the world feel immersive. Now, in my opinion, the weakest part about the game is the combat. It just feels a bit boring and repetitive. Now, I know it is not the main focus of the game, but the way it works is Ori basically shoots projectiles at enemies. The only thing you do is just press a button and the projectile just auto aims at the enemies. There are upgrades that make it a bit more fun, I guess, but in my opinion, combat isn't the strongest part of Ori. Overall, I think Ori and the Blind Forest is a great platformer that's fairly challenging and visually stunning. I've heard the second game is a lot better and improves in a lot of ways, so after I finish Ori and the Blind Forest, I'm planning to play that one next. Next up on the list is SIFU, a very challenging beat-em up action game. I guess the best way to describe this game is a beat-em up Souls-like, where the game is extremely punishing, where you've got to be ready to die a lot, learn from it, adapt, and eventually get better. That's the whole gameplay loop, and honestly, it's also what makes the game so addicting. The game is pretty short since it only has 5 levels, but going through them over and over again, trying to beat your high scores, improve your time, or stay as young as you can, is where the fun really is. The death system in SIFU is also really unique and something I've never seen before. The way it works is every time you die, your death counter goes up, and when you revive, your age increases by that amount. So if your counter is at 2, for example, and you die again, you'll come back to life 2 years older. If you go down after that, the counter increases to 3, meaning you age plus 3 years the next time you revive. This, however, can stack up really fast, making the game very tough, especially if you're stuck at a boss. As you get older, you deal more damage, but your health decreases permanently with each age milestone that you reach. I enjoyed my time with SIFU and it definitely got me pretty frustrated at times. But once I learned the weaving mechanic, things went a lot smoother. It's definitely something you want to use, and I would definitely recommend this game for people that like a challenge and enjoy grinding to get better at the game. Alright, so first things first, I haven't finished Mass Effect 1, nor am I far into the game. I think I just landed on Alyx, but it's been about 7 months since I last played this, so I'm kinda going off of old memory here. So story-wise, from what I understand, there's basically a human team that discovers an ancient alien device that shows a warning about a major threat coming, but a rogue agent attacks the colony and steals it. After proving what happened to the Citadel Council, humanity gets its first Spectre, which is a special agent who can act on the Council's behalf to hunt them down. I will say I'm usually not the biggest fan of those galaxy, space, war stories, but I've heard that the plot gets really good, so I'm curious to see more when I pick the game back up. So what I first noticed when I started the game was that the movement and the controls definitely felt a bit clunky at first. Shooting just feels awkward, the movement feels heavy. For example, you can sprint while holding down the spacebar button. You know, just those tiny little things that you need to get used to. I will say the combat does have a tactical side. Basically, there is this squad system where you can assemble a squad out of 3 members consisting of people who you met throughout the story. You can give them weapons, upgrade their abilities, and there's just like this whole RPG element to it, which adds a nice touch to the combat. With that being said, I have heard that the sequels will improve on it a lot. The world itself in Mass Effect feels pretty big. There's lots of planets to check out, plenty of NPCs to talk to, and side missions all over the place, and the overall atmosphere gives off some great classic sci-fi vibes. Mass Effect 1 definitely seems like a promising game. I'm not sure when I will return to it, but whenever I do, I'm pretty sure I'll have a good time. And then we are here. Hollow Knight. Guys, Words can't describe how much this game changed my perspective on indie games, 2D games, platformers, and even Metroidvanias. As far as I'm aware, this was actually my first Metroidvania game that I played. Now, before I started, I heard so many good things about this game, so I finally decided to pick it up and jump in with no expectations. And to be fair, guys, every single bit of praise I had heard was true for me. From the world building, the characters, the lore behind the characters, the atmosphere, and especially the bosses, they all just blew me away. Exploration is easily one of the game's strongest points. Every corner of the map feels like it hides a secret. That could either be lore, collectibles, or even a whole new area with a boss fight in it. It constantly makes you want to see every inch of Hellonets, which is the location the game takes place in. One of my favorite and memorable boss fights were the Mantis Lords. That fight showed me just how good a 2D boss battle can be. It wasn't necessarily a difficult fight, although I was overwhelmed at the beginning, but this fight just got me to a point where the game just clicked for me, and it's just a nice fast-paced boss fight where the rhythm and flow is just so good. You really get into the flow of dodging and hitting, recognizing certain patterns of the boss, and it's just all in all a well-designed boss fight. Now, before Hollow Knight, I barely touched 2D games or even indie game titles at all, but this game definitely changed that for me. All the indie titles on this list, yeah, they were all after I played Hollow Knight. Overall, I cannot praise this game enough. It's an amazing game. I would definitely say for me a 10 out of 10. And for anyone that is interested in diving into the indie games or 2D platformers, this is a must to play. And who would have thought? This was not planned, but right when I reached the end of Hollow Knight, a very interesting announcement was made. Team Sherry. Oh boy. Yo. What? September 4? That's so close. No way. That's next month already. What a great time this was. Just as I finished the main story of Hollow Knight Silksong was about to be released, and you bet I was gonna be there on launch day. Silksong was supposed to be a DLC for the first game, but eventually they decided to make it its own game. And oh boy, did they cook with this one. After waiting almost a whole decade, it was finally time. This was actually the most wishlisted game on Steam, and it sure as hell did not disappoint. There were a lot of new changes they made. The addition of quests was a nice way to get rewards and explore different parts of the map. Then there is, in my opinion, one of the best additions, the crests. The crests are items you can collect, and each crest changes Hornet's moveset and also changes which trinkets. Trinkets are basically the tools and abilities you can equip, allowing you to make interesting builds for Hornet. So same as with Hollow Knight, the world feels so alive and atmospheric. Great new characters get introduced and the boss fights are incredible, but honestly, I expected that already. Now I will say, once you enter Act 2, to me it felt like there was a significant difficulty spike. Lots of enemies that hit much harder, and don't even get me started on some of the new areas that are introduced. I'm looking at you, Blightwater. I beat the game the first time by the end of Act 2, only to find out there is a final Act 3. So I went back, completed Act 3 and loved it even more. While I definitely got frustrated and raged sometimes during parts, I enjoyed this game so much. I did notice during my time with Silksong that they put a lot more focus on the platforming side in Silksong, which to be honest I don't mind. I completed the Path of Pain in Hollow Knight, which is arguably the hardest platforming part in the first game. Now whether I like this game more than Hollow Knight, honestly I couldn't tell you, since I played both games so shortly after each other. I enjoyed them both in their own way. I don't have like any specific nostalgic feelings. Each game has amazing unique boss fights. There is tons of stuff to do in each game, and they're just both great games to play. I would definitely recommend Silksong if you have enjoyed the first Hollow Knight, and I'm looking forward to when they start adding new content to Silksong. As part of the horror marathon that I did during Halloween, I decided to finally try some horror games, even though I get scared super easily. One of them being what is considered by many gamers one of the best horror games ever made, Silent Hill 2. Going into this game, the only thing I knew about it was Pyramid Head, since I remember seeing a movie and really liked the design. Other than that, it was all new to me. I loved the whole abandoned ghost town setting, the creepy atmosphere, the music, the constant fog, the buildings, and it all felt really eerie. I played the original 2001 PC version with some enhancement mods, and I also played it on the normal difficulty with normal riddles. Yeah, I'll be honest, I suck at puzzle solving, so I did use some guides a couple of times. So when I played it, I was honestly surprised how well it still holds up today. The biggest thing I had to get used to was the semi-fixed camera. I know some other games use it too, like the old Resident Evil games, and I believe the Alone in the Dark games too. And it definitely made some part really stressful, where I was moving towards the camera and I couldn't see what was in front of me. The weakest part for me was definitely the combat. Melee just felt super awkward and shooting was mostly auto-aim, although I will say that is pretty understandable with this type of camera system. Now once I got my guns in the game, I have to say most enemies didn't really felt like a threat anymore, and the game was also quite generous with giving you ammo. Silent Hill 2 is clearly more about the story than the gameplay. Now I am a type of gamer that not always pays close attention to the story, so the whole Mary Maria thing was pretty confusing to me. Overall, Silent Hill 2 is a great game for its time. It's not a particularly scary game, but it's more about the psychological horror side. If you are a horror fan though, this should definitely be on your list. I played Riders Republic back in 2023 for the first time on consoles, and I recently picked it up again while it was on sale for PC. It's just a fun open world game to mess around in. You can cruise around, do tricks and complete events, and it's honestly one of those games where you can quickly jump into, do a couple of missions or drive around in the free roam, then drop out again. For me, the biggest thing was how good the game feels and how you can effortlessly switch between different extreme sports. For example, you can gain speed with the rocket wingsuit, then switch to a bike or BMX or any other sports to pull off those crazy stunts. There's just so much room for creativity. You can also place ramps, rails and other objects to build these unique events. Across the map there are also lots of collectibles, and overall the world feels very alive. This is also because the world you're in is often shared with players or their ghosts. Now the events or missions in the game are, I would say, fine. They mostly consist out of races or trick-based challenges, but for me honestly the game is just the most fun in free roam. Now there are large-scale races which are called mass races, and they are pretty fun. You can basically compete with up to 64 players simultaneously, and it definitely makes up for some big chaotic fun races. I still enjoy Riders Republic from time to time whenever I just want to mess around. I would say if you can get it for a reasonable price, it's definitely worth picking up. Next up is another indie game that I played after finishing Hollow Knight. Hotline Miami is one of those games that if it wasn't for streaming or through recommendations, I would have never thought about playing it. It's a top-down action game set in an alternate 1989 Miami, and the soundtrack in this game kinda slaps. Ooh, I like this kind of like 80s synthwave style. Kinda sick. The game is pure close quarter chaos where you use melee weapons and guns to clear each level, and what makes it really tough is that you'll die in one hit, so every mistake that you make will reset the level. It's similar to something like SIFU in the sense that you have to be ready to die a lot and learn through repetition. The game itself is pretty short, but that's because the focus of the game is really about replayability and improving and perfecting each run. One of the most fun things for me was how many ways you can approach each area. You can throw your weapons to take down an enemy, pick it back up and instantly throw it again. The game just gives you so many creative options, making the gameplay super satisfying. Overall, Hotline Miami is a fun, fast-paced game with cool 80s synth vibes, and it definitely can get pretty difficult later on. But if you're into these games where it's all about replayability, improving and perfecting each run, I think you will have a good time. Next game on the list is Prey, an FPS immersive sim published by Bethesda and developed by Arcane Studios. It was released in 2017, and this is one of those games where I didn't necessarily dislike it, I just can't get into it and find the motivation to pick it back up. There wasn't anything specific I hated, but I have yet to return to it. The game takes place on a space station called the Telos 1, and you basically explore, do quests, fight enemies and gather loot. You've got your standard mechanics, but what really makes this game stand out is how many different ways you can approach a situation. Telos 1 basically feels like one big interconnected puzzle, and as you progress you keep gaining new tools and abilities that let you return to earlier areas, and you can solve things in a lot of different ways. The zero gravity sections were, in my opinion, pretty cool. You can go outside the station and travel between different areas of Telos 1. The way the whole station is designed is really well done and makes exploring genuinely fun. The combat in this game took a bit to get used to, as enemies aren't exactly pushovers, especially at the beginning. Now I did set the game to hard difficulty, so that may have played a role. As you progress, you get a nice variety of weapons, and what makes this combat even more interesting are the neuromods. These are basically abilities acquired through skill trees, and they give you powerful new ways to take on enemies and open up a ton of creative options for dealing with different threats. Hopefully I'll find the motivation to return to this game. I think I got about 6 hours into it so far, and I can definitely see why people love it, even if I haven't fully experienced that feeling myself yet. This next game, guys, is honestly my biggest disappointment of the year: Assassin's Creed Shadows. This was actually my first Assassin's Creed game since Assassin's Creed 2 back in the day, and I was so hyped for it because of the whole feudal Japan setting. I love games with samurai, ninja, shinobi, all that stuff, so this looked right up my alley. I picked it up on release day, played it for a couple of hours, and man, it was just not meeting my expectations. I kept waiting for the moment where it hopefully would have clicked, but yeah, it never really happened, which made it tough to stay invested. The game also has gotten a lot of criticism, but honestly, I couldn't care less about that. One of my favorite samurai-ish games ever is is Ghost of Tsushima, and I think my biggest mistake was comparing Shadows to that game. The combat just didn't feel as impactful as Ghost of Tsushima, which for me is honestly one of the most important aspects in a game like this. I will say though, the world in Shadows is beautiful. Just traveling around, exploring, and just the whole scenery is amazing. But the missions just felt pretty repetitive and uninteresting for me. I do like the dual protagonist approach with Yasuke and Naoe. You can choose to play as Yasuke, slow but also very aggressive, while Naoe is more agile, nimble, and sticks to the traditional stealth gameplay that the Assassin's Creed is known for. Assassin's Creed Shadows is by no means a bad game, but my mistake was just comparing it too much to Ghost of Tsushima, and Shadows just ended up feeling lackluster in a lot of ways because of that. I'll probably go back to it at some point, but right now it's definitely not on my priority list. Up next we have, in my opinion, one of the most underrated masterpieces of all time. Sleeping Dogs is an open world action adventure game released in 2012 with a heavy focus and influence from martial arts. And this game, let me tell you, from the combat, the driving, to the story, the exploration, everything about it is just enjoyable. You take on the role of Wei Shen, an undercover cop infiltrating the Sun On Yi triad, a crime gang that Wei is sent to take down from within. The story isn't the deepest or most complex, I would say, but it works as a solid undercover cop narrative. For fans of martial arts, this can be the perfect game for you. The combat feels smooth and fun. You can use environmental objects around you to finish off enemies, and there's a good variation of combos that you can pull off. I always compare the combat system to the Batman Arkham games, which also have a great combat system and fighting mechanics, but Sleeping Dogs just adds that martial arts flair to it. The world is set in Hong Kong, and honestly it feels incredibly alive. From the NPCs to the cars, the driving feels good. Everything about it just makes the world feel more immersive. There's even a day and night cycle, and during the night all the neon lights come on, making the city feel completely different. Sleeping Dogs has also some additional content, which I say is decent. It basically adds more missions, combat, and action to the game, which for this game is always a good thing. Overall, it's a solid title that's often very cheap on sales. Even for the full price, I'd say it's still worth it. If you are into open world titles where there's a lot of focus on the combat, you should definitely consider picking this game up. You'll get tons of hours out of it. Now, believe it or not, one of, if not my most played genres in gaming is the FPS genre. Even though there is no FPS shooter on this list so far, and I will say this year I haven't been hooked to a FPS game, but I did try out Delta Force. It's a reboot of an old franchise from 1998. Delta Force is a free-to-play, large-scale tactical first-person shooter, and for me, one of the most important things that I look into when I play a FPS shooter is the way the game feels, the movement, and overall I was pleasantly surprised with Delta Force. The game uses the operator system with abilities tied to each operator, allowing for some interesting tech that you can use in battles. The maps are what you would expect from a game like Battlefield. These are just big open maps with vehicles and helicopters in it, and I will say the graphics look very good, and there's also quite a bit of weapon variety to choose from. I've only played the attack and defend mode, which is the standard I believe, and overall I enjoyed my time playing Delta Force. Lies of P. So I played the base game when it originally released in 2023, and what an incredible game. If you enjoy Dark Souls, Elden Ring, or really any Souls-like game, this one is absolutely worth your time. It quickly became one of my favorite non-From Software Souls-like games. The story is solid, the world is fun to explore, the weapons that you find are interesting to use, and the boss fights are just so freaking good. One of the most fun mechanics Lies of P brings to the genre is the ability to mix and match weapon parts. Every non-boss weapon is split into a blade and a handle, each affecting things like damage, scaling, the way you attack, and stamina usage, each consisting of one handle and a blade, with the moveset and Fable arts you want. The Fable arts being basically special weapon attacks. It's pretty straightforward, but it gives you tons of freedom to try out unique builds and find a setup that fits your playstyle. There's also a lie or true system where you decide to tell the truth or lie, and those choices actually affect how characters react and how parts of the story unfold. The main reason I jumped back in was the release of the Overture DLC, which released this year. It serves as a prequel to the main story, and I enjoyed every second of it. It was just so good to come back to this game, even though I really struggled with some parts. Now for me, the DLC felt noticeably harder than the base game. Even the most basic enemies hit really hard and can be a real threat if you're not paying attention. That said, the difficulty didn't feel unfair or anything. With the right setup, the right weapons and abilities, it's definitely doable. The DLC bosses can be brutal but memorable, and it even throws in what might be the toughest fight in the whole series. No spoilers. Overall, both the base game and the DLC are great experiences for any fan of the Souls-like genre. The world exploration and the boss encounters are so well designed, and if you're into the Souls-like genre, you should definitely play this. Another game I played during the horror marathon was SOMA, a survival horror game that takes place in an underwater research facility. The setting in this game is one of the coolest locations I've ever seen in a horror game. Now, that is to say that I haven't played many horror games in my life. The level design is filled with details, notes, and the interaction is also pretty great. You can pick up lots of objects even if most don't even serve a direct purpose. I think I'm about 6 hours in, and what I've noticed so far is that SOMA does feel pretty puzzle focused at times, which makes progressing to the game a bit hard for me since I'm not great at solving puzzles. I had to look up a lot of guides when I played Silent Hill 2. You can also explore the deep waters outside these stations, and those underwater sections look really cool. There isn't much happening there yet, but the atmosphere and visuals are impressive. Overall, the time I've spent with the game has been interesting. I'd like to return to it eventually, but with so many other games I want to check out, it's something I'll probably come back to later. Another great Souls-like game that actually released this year was the first Berserker Khazan. This game uses a pretty cool cel shading art style which makes the game look very appealing to me. Now obviously graphics aren't the only thing that is important here, but let me tell you, the gameplay in this game is very fluid and fast paced. My opinion, definitely its strongest point. There's lots of different skills you can invest in throughout a skill tree. There's a selection of 3 total main weapon types. Now you would think only 3 weapons in a Souls-like game to choose from, combat would be very limited, but the amount of skills that you can invest in and use throughout the combat definitely makes up for it. I will say the world and exploration in the first Berserker Khazan are pretty mediocre. Every map is accessed through the main hub area and the level design feels very linear. Honestly pretty bland in my opinion, with little to no exploration. Besides the main story, there are also some side quests that you can do that basically are set in the same maps that you've already explored, sometimes inverted and with a different dungeon boss. The story is also nothing really too special. I didn't really felt attached to characters and they simply did not stick with me as much as I would have hoped. Aside from that, the game has excellent bosses and some enemy variety that can give you a challenge. I would say if you are into Souls-likes and like flashy combat, this game can be fun to try out. If you are interested however in world exploration, deep lore and good level design, I would say this game definitely feels lackluster in that part. A series I always wanted to try but never knew what the best entry point is was Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy has so many games that it can feel overwhelming for someone who is new to the series. In the end, I decided to stick with the way I usually approach long-standing franchises, which is starting from the beginning. So I kicked off my Final Fantasy journey with Final Fantasy 1. Maybe worth noting that I played the PSP version, which I believe added some overall improvements and also a bonus dungeon called the Labyrinth of Time. Final Fantasy 1 is just a nice, simple, classic JRPG experience. Nothing fancy, but also not bare bones. The story is a classic 4 heroes save a princess which eventually saves the whole world, and it just does everything right, what you would expect from a classic JRPG. The game may get somewhat challenging later on, but with a little bit of strategizing, it's definitely doable. The exploration in this game has a nice overworld where you can visit different towns, buy gear, take on dungeons and fight bosses. The game I would say is pretty short, but long enough to enjoy it and get a good feeling for the series and how the basic mechanics work. Now I am aware that this game resembles very little as to what the series is today. However, it is still a great game and definitely the start of a great franchise. There is no real lore behind all the characters or in-depth world building, but Final Fantasy 1 is definitely a way to get yourself familiar with the Final Fantasy series, and overall it's just a solid title. Continuing our journey on the Final Fantasy series, I played Final Fantasy 2 right after 1 on the PSP. I will say this game made a big change in the leveling system, which honestly made it way less enjoyable for me than the first one. Instead of the traditional way of gaining levels by defeating monsters, stats improve by using certain actions on your character. So for example, attacking enemies raises strength, taking damage boosts HP, and casting spells increases MP. So weapons and magic get stronger the more you use certain actions on your character. It is strategic but can definitely feel grindy compared to Final Fantasy 1's straightforward leveling. It's an interesting concept but executed poorly in my opinion. For example, you can also cheese this system by going into a battle with a weak monster and repeatedly keep attacking your own party and then heal. Now what I will say is, however, I wasn't a huge fan of the system. It did allow you to have a lot of freedom on how you build your characters and which skills you want to improve on them. Another thing which I did not like as much was for some reason the encounter rate in Final Fantasy is really high. I even looked it up if it was just me, but apparently other people noticed it too during their playthrough. It seems like sometimes you just get into a room and for every single step you take there is an encounter, which makes going through some of these dungeons really annoying and tedious. The story I will say they have improved on. The characters have an own personality this time around and some backstories as well. It's overall a pretty dark story, I would say, where without giving too much spoilers, people die and sacrifices are made. The boss fights are pretty good too, nothing too crazy or difficult, but yeah, it's overall a decent game. The world this time around is also filled with towns and kingdoms to explore. However, you gotta be careful because this game doesn't lock you out of high level areas from the beginning. So even going 5 steps to the left or right by accident can land you in a battle with a pretty high level enemy that you can't defeat right away. I also played through the Soul of Rebirth bonus campaign, which felt so unbalanced and difficult when you start out, but it definitely became more doable once you get your stats up. It is certainly a different experience than Final Fantasy 1, but still enjoyable overall. Honestly, if you like this sort of leveling system or are curious to know more, go ahead and give it a try. Next up is the third entry, Final Fantasy 3. And this time around, for the PSP version and I think also for the DS version, they decided to go with a 3D art style, which I actually really like. I'm a big fan of 3D games, 3D animations and whatnot, so I was curious what it was like playing a Final Fantasy game in 3D for the first time. So in this game, I guess they thought maybe the leveling mechanic didn't work out as planned or people didn't like it as much, so they decided to go back to the traditional leveling system. And I would say this game is more similar to Final Fantasy 1 in terms of gameplay, but with an improved story similar to Final Fantasy 2. The job or class system this time around is fully flexible, which will allow each party member to change jobs or classes, and you are not locked into having, for example, 1 white mage and 1 black mage and 1 knight. You can choose to have 2 white mages and 2 black mages, or 2 warriors, 1 white mage and 1 black mage. Everything is possible, which makes gameplay very fun and diverse. Final Fantasy 3 expands the world exploration by giving you access to various transportation methods like the ship, the canoe, but it also introduces new ways to move around the map, like rideable chocobos and additional airships such as the Enterprise, the Nautilus and the Invincible. The world again is filled with dungeons, towns and kingdoms to explore, and overall it just ends up feeling a lot more open once you start getting all the vehicles. Now from all the 3 games that I've played so far, Final Fantasy 3 definitely had the most brutal endgame experience so far. Unlike the most recent release of the classic Final Fantasy games being the Pixel Remaster, the PSP version, just like older versions, has no quick save feature, meaning you can only save in the overworld, so you have to do the final dungeon in one go. And there's also 6 bosses in total that you need to defeat. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie guys, I just used save states on it because otherwise it would have been a pain to get through this. Despite the brutal endgame, however, I actually ended up getting quite addictive to the game. I learned that this version had a super boss called the Iron Giant, which is the hardest boss in a Final Fantasy game. So I basically grinded the best sets in the game, the Onion Gear armor set, and leveled them up all the way to level 99 in order to take down this boss. And I even got a nice certificate for it. I would say I enjoyed Final Fantasy 3 the most from all the games that I've played. The game just has a nice 3D chibi art style to it, and the flexible job system makes battles more fun. And even though the endgame was brutal, it was actually pretty fun to go through and it was a wild experience. Overall, a super good game and I would definitely recommend it. Oh, we are not done with the Final Fantasy series guys, but trust me, this is the last one I played this year. After Final Fantasy 3, I took a bit of a break from the Final Fantasy games. I think it was like a couple of months, but recently decided to get back into it from where I left off. Final Fantasy 4 is, you guessed it, the 4th entry in the series, and honestly this game is just a collection of most stuff from all the previous games put together into one. It has the best story so far with deep, memorable character development, good gameplay, and the world is even more interesting than it ever was. I think I've read somewhere or heard somewhere that from Final Fantasy 4 onwards the series really began to develop into the series that most people know it for today. They did remove the flexible job system and instead went back to characters having their own fixed class. However, I think this is mostly due to certain story events. Just like Final Fantasy 3, there is a traditional leveling system and the overworld map is again filled with lots of vehicle transportation methods and even a whole separate underworld map to go through. Another new thing Final Fantasy 4 added was the real-time battle system. This system lets each character act only when their action bar fills up, so battles happen in real time instead of those fixed turns, and it really makes combats faster and more dynamic. This time around, they really put a lot more effort into the story. The characters go through real changes and it just makes the whole adventure feel more meaningful. I would say the game feels mostly balanced, although there are some points where you may have to grind a bit. Overall, I had a great time with Final Fantasy 4. I just think it's the best so far from the 4 games I've played, and I'm currently playing through the direct sequel, which is called Final Fantasy 4 The After Years, which takes place 17 years after the base game. I had a great time with the Final Fantasy game so far, and I'm definitely gonna continue my journey next year. For the next game, I had no idea this was coming out or heard anything about it, besides maybe watching a trailer or so. Deliver at All Costs released this year, and what surprised me was during the first week of release, it was given for free by Epic. So I figured out I'd give it a shot, and turns out it's a fun, over-the-top chaotic delivery game, and there's some great vehicle destruction physics. You take on missions and each one throws some ridiculous twists at you, usually involving delivering something so absurd that driving even becomes more chaotic. During those missions you can get chased, there's stuff flying out of your trunk that you need to deliver, and it just throws a bunch of random stuff at you to make you drive under pressure. I didn't finish it, but it's definitely one of those games where you can hop into whenever you can, play for a couple of hours and then put it down again. Rip and tear, baby. We've probably all heard of Doom, one of the most classic and defining early FPS shooters in the genre. I've never played a Doom game before, and that's why I decided to pick up the 2016 Doom, and honestly went in with no expectations. Well, this game is just a nice shooter where you can just shut your brain off, and it's fast paced, it's super satisfying, it feels rewarding, the setting is really cool, there's a lot of gore in it, and it's just overall a fun arcade shooter experience. And what I really liked about the combat was that the swapping between weapons in combat feels just nice and seamless. Now there is a story in Doom, it's nothing too deep or anything. You wake up on Mars and everything's gone to hell, literally, and you're basically trying to stop a demon invasion. Well, I think the story, is just there, I guess. The beauty of this game really lies into its combat and the level design. I'm still working on my first playthrough, but here and there I just boot up the game and play for a couple of hours, and overall it's just really enjoyable. Next is Hideo Kojima's 2019 Death Stranding. Now whenever you hear about this game, you most likely hear two sides. One being people who love it and praise it for its atmosphere, story, world building, music, and unique gameplay systems, while the other one being people who dislike it because a large part of the gameplay does involve walking long distances and delivering packages, and it can kind of feel slow or repetitive. In Death Stranding, you play as Sam Porter Bridges, a delivery guy in a post-apocalyptic United States where creatures called BTs roam the land and causes these things called voidouts that destroys parts of the world. Your mission basically is to reconnect isolated cities and people using a communications network called the Chiral Network. You do this while uncovering the mysteries behind the Death Stranding, a strange phenomenon that links the living and the dead. I will give it to the story though, it is so bizarre and confusing on what is happening in the world of Death Stranding, but whatever is happening, it just looks sick. From the cinematics, the cutscenes, everything just looks stunning. The gameplay revolves around delivering cargo from one point to another, and over time as you deliver more packages, you get better gear and infrastructure, making deliveries easier. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this game. I played it for around 2 hours, which I know a lot of people will say it gets better after the first couple of hours. I want to like it, but right now I just can't get into it. Maybe it is because of the slow pacing that I just can't get used to, or it's something else. I want to pick it back up eventually, but right now it's just kind of on the sides. Next up is the sequel of the beloved Skate series. It took 15 years for them to release a new game, but they finally did it. I was surprised and also a bit skeptic that they decided to release it as a free-to-play game. Now the game is still in early access, so it is expected that the game will receive regular updates and patches, but the whole free-to-play aspect always gets me worried in terms of like how they're gonna handle the monetization. From what I've heard overall, there are like mixed reviews of this game. Some people dislike it because it feels stripped down compared to the older games, and it leans too much into the always online live servers model, which I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a big fan of that either, but I still have my fun with it. Skate still has some of the goofy physics that you know from the old games, and the skating itself and pulling off tricks actually feels very good in this game. Now from what I can tell, the only monetization model is through the use of cosmetics, not really like anything gameplay changing. So that's I guess a good point, but we'll have to see in the future. Now the map in Skate, I guess I find alright I guess. There are plenty of cool spots to skate and do tricks, but what I'm really missing is like some sort of natural terrain, maybe some forest location or some hills. Now I think with the whole live service treatment, they will eventually add new maps to the game, but right now it just feels a bit flat. I don't know, we need less city, more natural locations. Now hopefully they will support the game for a long time and bring back classic maps from the previous Skate games. That will be really fun, and I will definitely try it out from time to time. Man, this next game was so awful to play. Now, not because of gameplay or anything, but the combination of these old graphics and clunky mechanics with some cheap jump scares made me terrified while I played this game. Cry of Fear is a free-to-play survival horror game released in 2012 and was actually derived from a mod for the game Half-Life. The game is basically about a man that explores a dark city full of like this weird ass creatures, And the story focuses on like the fear, the trauma, and the whole mind of this guy named Simon, and basically his mental descent. And the world just has this like kind of eerie, sinister, dark feeling to it. Now for some reason I found the combat in this game really difficult. You basically have a stamina meter and just enemies can hit you very easily, and they take quite a bit of hits to die, where at some points I was even getting frustrated. The ammunition and healing items are also pretty scarce, so you must carefully choose when you use your ammo. And yeah, the worst part, the amount of times I got jump scared playing this game is crazy. Here's just a couple of clips from when I played it. Oh, what the fuck? Definitely return to that game. But whoa! What the fuck? Whoa! What the fuck? I've yet to complete it, and to be honest, I don't know if I will ever want to go back to this game. I still in a way enjoyed it during my time playing it. Yeah, the best thing about this, it's actually a free game, so if you are into horror games, I would say try it out. There's nothing to lose except for your dignity. Getting over it. Remember when this game released and everybody was playing it? Yeah, I only play this game because I stream, but otherwise, if you play this game in your own free time, you might need to get yourself checked, buddy. This game is just pure rage fuel, it's rage inducing, it's hard. Every single mistake that you make can cause you tons of progress. Even the most minor mistakes can be devastating. And to this day, I can't get past these freaking stone boulders. So yeah, I don't even know what to say about this game. If you value your sanity, I do not recommend playing this at all. Next game isn't any better, and I played it for the very same reasons as getting over it. In Jump King, you play as a knight who must climb a massive vertical tower to reach the top, where, and I quote, "A smoking hot babe is rumored to be waiting." From the gameplay, you can see that it has the same rage-inducing difficulty as getting over it, although in my opinion, it is a bit more manageable. The game does feel pretty satisfying once you start getting the hang of it. Jumping is very precise. The longer you hold the jump button, the higher and further you will jump. And once it like clicks with you, the game puts you in this like kind of flow where every jump just lines up. Your timing is gonna feel more natural, and the game becomes more about instinct than thought. I think the highest I got was the 3rd stage only, and honestly I would never touch this game if it weren't for streaming. The way it's designed, a single mistake can cost you so much progress, which is, you know, both frustrating, but at the same time it's also the charm of these kinds of games. I didn't really plan on playing Amnesia the Bunker, but just before Halloween, Epic Games decided to give it away for free. I've known about the Amnesia series, with the Dark Descent being the most popular, I think, with the whole PewDiePie playthrough back in the day, so I thought might as well try it out on stream. The game takes place in an underground World War I bunker and does a solid job of creating this creepy atmosphere. The darkness and limited visibility makes it a genuinely scary game. In terms of gameplay, you basically explore the bunker while solving puzzles and manage resources like generators and light sources. Turning on the generator temporarily powers the lights, making it easier to see and safer to move through certain areas. So you gotta do most stuff that you can do in a limited amount of time before everything goes dark again and the bunker becomes more dangerous. So eventually I got stuck trying to restore the power in the comms room, and yeah, I got pretty frustrated that I put the game down and just moved on to something else. Yeah, I don't know guys, I just suck at puzzle solving in games, and whenever I can progress, I just get frustrated. And I know, that's on me. I haven't gone back to the game yet, but who knows, maybe I'll pick the game back up someday. Next up in the list is GTA 4, one of the biggest games released in 2008, and the game that came before the famous GTA 5. I actually did play GTA 4 back in the day, especially the multiplayer on the Xbox 360, but I realized I never actually finished the campaign or the DLC that was later released. I picked it up on PC and I'm currently playing through the story mode, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm having such a freaking blast. This game is just a timeless classic GTA experience. It is filled with content, the world is super fun to explore, and the missions are also pretty good. Exactly what you would expect from a Rockstar game. The story follows Niko Bellic as he comes to Liberty City chasing the American dream. However, while doing so, he gets pulled into all kinds of criminal activities, becoming involved in robberies, assassinations, and organized crime. Niko himself is just a super hilarious protagonist. He doesn't really try to be funny, but the way he is just voiced and his lines are just hilarious. I'm not gonna lie, the nostalgia just hits different with this one. The game has always had this yellowish filter over everything, which kind of gives the game a gritty look compared to GTA 5, for example. Personally, I don't mind it at all, and obviously there's also mods that you can improve the graphics with. Now, one thing I did notice when I'm playing through GTA 4 right now is that the driving mechanics in this game are so freaking awesome. awkward. It just feels like you're constantly driving on ice, your cars are just slipping. If you oversteer a little bit to the left or right, your car just does a whole freaking 180 spin, so you have to counter steer a lot, and it's just overall a super awkward system. Now, it's not horrible, but if you come from GTA 5, you really have to get used to it. And I know some people like it, I just think compared to GTA 5, it's super awkward, especially motorcycles. They feel so awful to control. I've heard that they improved the driving in the DLC, but I haven't played them yet, so I have yet to experience it. Even though its sequel GTA 5 went on to do massive, and I'm talking massive numbers, and see huge success, I still think GTA 4 is absolutely worth going back to for the story mode alone. One genres of games where I can put a lot of hours into are survival crafting games. I have played quite a few of them, like Minecraft, Ark Survival Evolved, Conan Exiles, and a couple more, but I never really got around to trying out Valheim. Valheim is one of those games which I play occasionally. I have my moments where I'm really addicted to, well, survival crafting games as a whole, and then I don't touch the game for like weeks. Right now, I think I'm about to face the 5th boss, if I'm not mistaken. I'm playing Valheim solo, which makes the game very, very grindy, and also pretty difficult, especially at the beginning. You can die very easily, and yeah, the worst part is just farming materials, honestly. It's just really slow and tedious sometimes. For example, I had a hard time finding silver in the mountains biome, and fully maxing out gear required quite a lot of it. Transporting ores is also a pain since ores can quickly stack up and they're extremely heavy, even with the Megging Yord, which I believe is the only item that you can equip that will increase your weight capacity. While you technically could speed up the process with portals that you can build in-game, the whole process just still feels like a drag. Yeah, I ended up adjusting the harvest rate or else I would have not enjoyed it as much, I think. Now, for the things that I liked in Valheim, the world is actually pretty big. There's a couple of biomes for you to explore, and they each contain dungeons and a boss where you can gather like rare materials, and the world is just very cool. Now, one thing that is crucial in this game are food buffs and stamina management. Every meal will increase your health and stamina depending on which combination of food you use. So picking the right meals together is important, since you use stamina for almost all your actions. That includes attacking, blocking, placing structures, running, jumping, and yeah, if you run out of stamina and you get a hit, you're in quite a bit of trouble. The building system in Valheim, I would say, is pretty decent, with the exception of sometimes you just can't build in a certain way due to the structure needing like a foundation or a wooden beam. And sometimes it can get frustrating trying to build a roof, only to find out that the last parts of the roof will constantly break due to them not having enough support. And yeah, overall it's just it's a good system, don't get me wrong, but it can get kind of frustrating when you can't figure out why something isn't placing. Now, for the bosses in this game, I can't speak for the co-op experience, but when you take on these bosses solo, I will say you're in for a long fight most of the time. The bosses have tons of health, they can hit hard, you can die very easily and lose all your stuff, so you have to backtrack and gather everything and make the food combinations again. It can be quite a pain, let's just say that, but with proper preparation and proper gear setup, it is not the worst. I would say if you like investing your time and getting immersed into a survival crafting world, Valheim can definitely be a game for you. However, if you don't like the grinding aspect, I would advise to set the gathering rate to at least 2 times or 2.5 times the multiplier for it to be more enjoyable for you. Another amazing indie title, Celeste follows Madeline as she attempts to climb Celeste Mountain while dealing with personal feelings like anxiety and self-doubt. Along the way, she is confronted by a darker version of herself that represents her fears and negative thoughts. The climb resembles her internal struggles, making the story feel personal and surprisingly emotional for a platformer. Celeste is a platformer with incredibly satisfying and fluid movement. From the pixel art, the challenge the game gives you, it's just such a good game overall. It's often argued to have some of the best movement physics and systems in any 2D platformer, and honestly, after playing it, it's hard to disagree. Combine the amazing movement with excellent level design and it honestly makes for a perfect game. After beating the main game, harder variants of the existing maps are also unlocked. These are called B and C sites. There's also a big modding community that adds even more content to the game, from brand new mechanics to some of the hardest maps ever made. And let's not forget about the music, because it is absolutely worth talking about. The soundtrack just perfectly matches the mood of the game, whether you're struggling to go through some of these levels or just taking a quiet moment to breathe and admire the beauty of this game. Honestly, if you like platformers, Celeste is absolutely a must on your list, and I highly recommend playing this. Up next is probably one of the scariest games I've ever played, Alien Isolation. And let me tell you guys, this game makes you so anxious and stressed the entire time. You'll find yourself panicking over and over again on your playthrough. The game takes place on an abandoned space station called the Sevastopol. You play as Amanda Ripley, who is trying to figure out what happened to her mother while she is escaping the station. I would say this game is pretty long. It took me around 16 hours to beat, which I was not expecting for a horror game. You spend most of the game completing various tasks to progress, but the chase sequence in this game with the alien are easily the scariest part. It's one thing that I hate being chased in a horror game, but I hate it even more when the thing chasing you is insanely fast.
Or the more I talk, I feel like the more I'm losing my voice. It's actually crazy. The more I'm freaking losing... No! Oh my god! Bro!
Throughout the game, you get different weapons and tools to defend yourself against robots, humans, and also the alien. But getting the flamethrower later in the game makes things much easier, since it's actually the best way to fend off the alien, and it takes away a lot of the tension and stress. It feels kind of overpowered almost. Usually I'm not the biggest fan of space settings, however in this game the Sevastopol feels very aesthetic. There are lots of cool details, and for example when you look out the window you can just see the rest of the station, and it just all feels very immersive. The alien's AI also learns from your actions, so it adapts to how you play and keeps you constantly on edge, which is a very cool addition. Overall I really like Alien Isolation. It is extremely scary with a lot of tense moments. It could have been a bit shorter in my opinion, but it's easily one of the scariest horror games I've played. You should definitely play this if you are a fan of the horror genre. Pogostuck or Rage with your friends. Yeah, the name already says it guys. This game is not fun, not with your friends, not on your own. It's rage inducing. I've only played it a couple of times. Obviously this game is meant to be difficult and annoying. It is all about precision and platforming, same as with getting over it and jumping. It's just one of those games where you're not gonna have a good time. So yeah, play at your own risk. That's all I'm gonna say about it. One of the few older games I've played this year, and I think the only GBA game, Castlevania Circle of Moon. I played this game during my vacation to Greece, and I played it at the airport, in the plane, also in Greece for a bit, and it was all around a pretty punishing experience. I remember playing this game as a kid, but never actually beating it. While I was searching before my trip for some games that I could play during my flight, this game just randomly came to mind, so I decided to give it another try. And man, I completely forgot that this game is super hard. It's like playing a Souls-like game on the GBA. I played this on my PS Vita through a emulator. The same as with Monster Hunter, I basically had to sometimes cheat with some save states because yeah, I probably couldn't even do it otherwise. This game is stupidly hard. The game just demands precise movement and timing with your attacks, while enemies can hit extremely hard. And on top of that, some of the areas are so annoying to navigate in. The game uses a dual setup system, which is sort of a magic ability mechanic that lets you combine two types of cards, an action card and a attribute card, in order to activate a unique ability. I think there are like 100 possible combinations in the game. And while this system is pretty interesting and make the game significantly easier, the cards have very low drop rates, making them super tedious to collect. And yeah, the RNG is overall just very low. This is the only Castlevania game I've played, and while I still had a decent time I would say, I definitely think it's not meant for everybody, and to this day I'm still stuck at the final boss, which is Dracula. One of the most popular and influential games ever made. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is not only known for transitioning the series from 2D to 3D, but it also helped redefine what a 3D action-adventure game could be. Now before this, Breath of the Wild was the only Zelda game I had ever played, so after loving that game, I wanted to see why Ocarina of Time is so highly praised, keeping in mind that this game released in 1998 and that some parts or mechanics may feel dated. Now I quickly want to mention that I have not finished the game yet and I'm still working on my first playthrough. One of the first things I noticed was how well Ocarina of Time still feels to this day, even for a game that came out such a long time ago. From the combat, the movement, then the lock-on system, it all feels pretty fluid, which makes the game surprisingly easy to pick up for new players. While I don't have the nostalgia factor that others may have, I have played quite a bit of older games on older consoles back in the day, which really helps me appreciate the graphics for their charm rather than realism. The game also includes many of its iconic elements that you may have seen or heard of nowadays, such as the iconic chest opening sound, some memorable music, and the way the story is set up. Although I haven't experienced much of the areas and dungeons yet, I really like how the world is connected through a central overworld that allows for free exploration. While I'm still early in the game, the first impressions makes me eager to continue playing more and experience what the world of Ocarina of Time has to offer. Next up is Half-Life Alyx. Actually one of the few VR games I've played this year and considered by many to be the best VR gaming experience you can get. Now again, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I've only played this game once on stream, mainly to test if the VR setup was working. So even though I've only got around like 3 hours into it, I haven't experienced nearly enough to give a full like complete opinion on it, but I'm just gonna give my thoughts on it so far. I'm pretty new to the whole VR experience, and I really like that you can interact with almost every object in the game. It really makes the game very immersive. It actually feels like you're in the game, controlling your character, and it's such a cool experience. For anyone that hasn't tried VR yet, please try it for once. It's such an amazing experience. The introduction of the gravity glove is so much fun. It's basically a sort of tool or glove that you put on, and you can basically point at an object and pull it by flicking your wrist, and it's just incredibly satisfying. There's also guns in the game, which feels super good. You have to manually reload every magazine, and it's just such a fun experience. Now this is going to be a short one. I will definitely return to this game to do a proper playthrough, but it's quite a pain to set up VR, which is kind of holding me back right now of playing more VR games. But once I figure out everything, I'll probably return to this game. My first ever roguelike experience, at least from what I'm aware of. Hades is one of the most beloved indie games ever made, and from playing it a couple of times, I can definitely see why. Y'all know the drill at this point. As with a lot of games, I haven't completed it yet. Right now I think I'm like stuck at the Minotaur and Theseus boss fight, and the game gets quite difficult later on. The gameplay loop in Hades is very unique and addictive. You take on procedurally generated dungeons, progressing through floors and gaining upgrades as you go. You get stronger each run, and eventually you will die, but those deaths are actually part of the progression as you unlock permanent upgrades and power-ups that make future runs easier. It's such a unique way to play the game. Not only is dying inevitable, it's part of the game to actually become stronger. The game has some really good voice acting as well, and what I also found interesting is that certain bosses and NPCs and other elements change as you play over and over again. The first boss actually changes after you defeat it a certain number of times, and this also alters the boss room and even the attacks. It just changes to a completely different boss battle. Hades also has great weapon variety, and overall the urge to do one more run is very high in this game, and that is also what makes it such an addictive game. Now I have no other roguelikes to compare it to, but I still enjoy it quite a bit. The next game definitely holds a special place in my heart. It was the first game that, and you've heard this right, that I did a complete playthrough of on stream. Code Vein is a Souls-like action RPG with a strong anime-inspired art style. This game is just basically Dark Souls meets anime vampires. In my opinion, this game is really underrated. The weapon variety is great, the story has some interesting lore, and the characters are quite unique with some good voice acting as well. And some of the cutscenes in this game, it looks like you're watching an anime. Obviously in a Souls-like game there's also boss fights. While some of them are very tough, they're also quite fun as well. The game even has its own version of Ornstein and Smog, and not to mention Code Vein has one of the best character creation systems I've seen in any Souls-like game. Now the game might not have a single outstanding feature, but in my opinion it simply does almost everything just right. For me, I definitely had a good time trying out different gifts, which are basically abilities you can equip, progressing through the story and trying out different weapons throughout the game. Because it is a Souls-like, some parts obviously can get kind of frustrating. The cathedral area, for example, it felt a bit like a copy of Dark Souls and Orlando, and it was just annoying to navigate through. Some enemy placements were very irritating, and the random invasions that can happen, they could go on for so long, and it honestly just feels like a drag. All in all, I had a great time with Code Vein, and now that they have announced a sequel, yeah, I'm definitely gonna play that. Bloons TD 6 is a classic in the tower defense genre. If you're not familiar with tower defense games, you're given a map with a path that enemies follow, in this case balloons, and your job is to place towers along the path to pop the balloons before they reach your base. If too many get through, you lose health and eventually the game. This game is just simple, it's fun, and it's addictive. It's one of those games where it's very easy to get into but pretty hard to master, and what I mean by that is the game gets progressively harder later on. There's like all kinds of challenges, a lot of maps to play. The way I usually play these games is while doing something else. For me, it is the perfect second monitor game. Bloons TD 6 also features hero units. These are basically special towers that level up on their own and bring powerful abilities to the battlefields. There's a large variety of maps, from simple paths to complex layouts that honestly really change how you strategize and plan your defenses. On top of that, there's daily and special challenges to do, unique rules and restrictions. There's just a lot of ways to test your strategies. Despite how easy it is to get into, Bloons TD 6 has quite a bit of depth. The challenges later on get pretty tough and require real planning. Choosing the right towers, figuring out which upgrades to take, and deciding where to place everything is super important. Overall, it's a great mix of casual fun and also strategic thinking if you want to get good at it. A game that wasn't even on my radar until someone recommended it was the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot. It's part of a reboot trilogy of the Tomb Raider series, and I picked up all three and finally dove into the series, which I've actually never
never played before aside from seeing the movies once. And with this game, I was pleasantly surprised. For me, it even became one of the best games I've played this year. The story drops you on the island of Yamatai, introducing Lara and her crew. And the whole game is about surviving while uncovering the island's secrets. The story was decent in my opinion. I didn't really feel invested into the story as much as I wanted to. The characters also weren't all that super interesting aside from maybe a few like Rod, who kinda established the father and daughter relationship, but yeah, it was just pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy or impactful, just an overall solid story. Now, where Tomb Raider really shines in my opinion is in the mix of gameplay, cutscenes and quicktime events, which definitely keeps you engaged and make the action feel very immersive. The gameplay feels very smooth, the puzzles are pretty fun, some can be somewhat challenging but they're completely doable. There are also lots of collectibles, hidden tombs and other stuff to do in the sort of semi-open world. And my only minor gripe with the game was the lack of a sprint button. Although the game is already quite fast-paced, the absence of a sprint option felt like a bit of an odd choice. I did rush a bit through the story and skip some side content, but even just the base game was already such a blast. Overall, Tomb Raider is a great game with its cinematic moments and engaging gameplay. Not to mention, if you're a fan of the Uncharted series, the two share quite a few similarities. Highly recommend it. The sequel and the second installment of the Tomb Raider reboot trilogy, Rise of the Tomb Raider. As far as I can tell, Rise of the Tomb Raider is mostly a story on its own. While it doesn't directly continue the plot of the first Tomb Raider game, you can definitely notice it builds on Lara's experience, skills and growth that she gained from the first game. The sequel basically continues Lara's expedition, with this time around uncovering the secrets of a legendary artifact called the Divine Source. Again, the story this time around isn't really groundbreaking or anything special, it's just overall an enjoyable one, I would say. Now, Rise of the Tomb Raider definitely feels like a complete sequel and an overall improvement over the first game. Gameplay mechanics are refined with an actual sprinting option this time around. New cool mechanics are introduced to improve the platforming, and basically all the good stuff from the first game is here, only better. I did have some parts where the game felt a bit janky and glitch. For example, I was exploring this tomb where I had to cross a sort of river with boats and ropes. But the boat physics in this game are so glitched which made it like 10 times harder than it should be. Or there are just some platforming parts that felt really inconsistent. Now, I haven't played the last one, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, but overall I would say I definitely enjoyed this one a bit more than the first one. For me, it's just a great improvement and I'm excited to close out the trilogy whenever I get around playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider. One of the more newer games on the list is Where Winds Meet, a free-to-play wuxia-style action-adventure RPG which first launched in China in the late 2024 and then saw a global release on November 14th this year. Now, this game is filled with content. For a game that is free to play, it's pretty wild. Now, the same as with Skate and any other live service game, I'm just a bit skeptical again if they're ever gonna implement stuff that is like pay to win. But so far from what I've seen, monetization only comes in the form of cosmetics, which honestly, if it stays like that, I'm fine with it. The world is quite filled with lots of activities to do. You can explore towns, complete caves or shrines, and even take part in mini games like playing cards or wrestling. There's just so much content, which makes the game very ambitious. You can also team up with friends in co-op and do quests together and explore the open world. There's also a PvP mode and lots of social features as well. Now, because it is free to play, the menus and pop-ups can get a little bloated and all over the screen. There's just so much to claim and menus to navigate through that it can be quite overwhelming at first, especially if you don't know what you're looking at and also for. The game has already seen huge amounts of success, with reaching 50 million players in 1 month, and I can only see the game growing from here. For a free-to-play game, this game is packed with content and absolutely worth trying out. A long-lasting video game series that has one of the most iconic characters in gaming, God of War. I started this series mainly because I'm very interested in playing God of War 2018, and as I mentioned before, I like to play game series in order of release. I had played God of War 3 back in the day, but I vaguely remember it, and I decided to go back to where it all started. Despite coming out in 2005, this game still plays really well. I played the PS3 remastered version and decided to go with hard difficulty. This decision, however, turned out to be one I kind of regretted in some parts. I love the whole Greek mythology setting, and seeing locations like Pandora's Temple or Athens is just very cool. Since it is the first game, we learn more about Kratos' backstory and why he became the ghost of Sparta and all sorts of reasons behind his anger. One of my favorite things about God of War is the incorporation of quicktime events. Yeah, I don't know what it is, guys, I just love them in video games. It's the same as with Tomb Raider, they just add more immersion to cutscenes, keeping you on edge and engaged. I really like these semi-fixed camera angles because they make for some outstanding cinematic shots throughout the game. but I will say sometimes because of the angles, it can make platforming a bit awkward sometimes, since timing and navigating jumps is way harder with these camera angles. Now onto the stuff I didn't really like. For one, the traps in this game can be brutal. Most of the time you die instantly and they're just a pain. Some sections throughout the game has you fight waves of enemies where it kind of just drags on for a long time. The enemies just keep on spawning. They have tons of health and hit very hard. It honestly felt a bit tedious most of the time. Where I had the most trouble with was this goddamn save your family from clones part during the final boss. And this section was so freaking hard. I had to look up a guide and follow it step by step just to beat it. There were annoying parts throughout the game, sure, but this part in specific definitely takes the cake. Overall, for the time it came out, God of War 1 is a great game, but sometimes it just feels very unforgiving. I definitely enjoyed it, but that last section was so difficult, it made me not want to go back to this game for a long time. Last on the list is God of War 2, the direct sequel to the first God of War game, continuing Kratos' story after he defeats Ares and becomes the God of War. Now the story this time around has a strong focus on Kratos' anger towards the gods, especially Zeus, who betrays him. After being stripped of his power and left for dead, Kratos is driven by revenge and sets out on a quest to change his fate, seeking a way to alter his past and confront the gods who betrayed him. What I immediately noticed is that this game is much more forgiving than the first one. Enemies don't feel overpowered, and it no longer feels like the game throws endless waves of enemies at you. The gameplay just feels better overall, animations are smoother, you get new attacks and weapons, more mechanics are introduced, and it's just an overall solid improvement across the board. There's a good mix of puzzles and platforming again in God of War 2, and I also felt like the puzzles weren't as frustrating as some of the ones in the first game. What's really cool about this game is that you explore more outdoor locations instead of mostly temples, dungeons, and mythological structures. You travel to ruins, Mount Olympus, the Island of Creations, and some swamp, forest-like areas, giving the game more variety and outdoor exploration than the first one. God of War 2 is a great title and does nothing less than the first game. It's a solid sequel and a great way to improve on everything that made the original God of War work. And that's the list, ladies and gents. Now, I have played more games, or I may have even forgotten a few, but I'm pretty happy with what made it onto the list. Very excited as to what new games are coming out next year. Alright guys, again, let me know in the comments down below which games you have enjoyed the most. And for now guys, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.